The Keeper of Words. Chapter 1. A New School. A New World. The morning Maya Chen arrived at Lakewood Primary School, she wore her favorite red jacket, the one with the tiny sunflowers embroidered on the collar. Her mother had sewn those sunflowers herself, staying up past midnight with a needle and golden thread, whispering, "Bunga matahari untuk anak matahariku." Sunflowers for my little son. Maya pressed her fingers against the embroidered petals as she stood at the school gate and stared at the wide brick building in front of her. Children rushed past her like a river rushing around a stone, laughing, shouting, calling to each other in a language that still felt, to Maya, like it was made of slippery things she could never quite hold on to. They had moved from Jakarta, Indonesia, to Melbourne, Australia, 3 months ago. 3 months was long enough for Maya to memorize the way to the nearest park, to know which shelf in the supermarket held her favorite crackers, and to understand, roughly, what her teacher, Mr. Aldridge, was saying when he spoke slowly and used his hands. But 3 months was not nearly long enough to feel safe inside English. In Jakarta, Maya had been the girl who told the funniest stories at lunch. She had been the one teachers called on because her hand was always the first in the air. She had been loud and bright and sure of herself like the sunflowers on her jacket. Here, she was quiet. She was careful. She sat in the third row and tried not to be noticed. "You must be Maya." She turned. A girl with a wide, warm smile and 2 enormous pom-pom hair ties stood beside her. She was taller than Maya, with dark brown skin and bright, curious eyes. "I'm Zara," the girl said. "Mr. Aldridge asked me to show you around. I moved here from Lagos 2 years ago, so I know what it's like." She paused, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "The canteen chips are terrible, by the way. Avoid them." Maya blinked. Then, carefully, she smiled. "Okay. Thank you." Zara's grin grew even wider. "Your English is good. Better than mine was when I first arrived. Come on. I'll show you the library first. It's the best room in the whole school." Maya followed Zara across the courtyard, past a basketball court and a garden with a wonky wooden sign that read Year 3 VGETABLE patch, and through a heavy door into the school library. She stopped. She had been in libraries before, of course. Jakarta had many. But this one was different, not because it was especially large or grand, but because of the smell. Old paper and wood polish and something else, something sweet and electric like the air before a thunderstorm. The shelves towered all the way to the ceiling, crammed with books of every color, their spines glowing dully in the morning light. A round window near the top of the far wall sent a beam of sunlight directly onto one particular shelf, the tallest shelf, set into an alcove at the very back of the room, and the books there seemed almost to glow. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Zara said softly. "Yes," Maya whispered. But she couldn't read the titles. Even from here, she could see the words, dark against the bright spines, and most of them were too fast for her. Too complicated, too many syllables that tangled in her mind before she could untangle them. She felt the familiar hollow feeling settle in her chest, the one that said, "You don't belong here yet." "Can I look?" she asked, gesturing towards the shelves. "Of course," said Zara. "Mrs. Baxter won't mind. She loves it when kids actually touch the books." Maya walked slowly between the shelves, trailing her fingertips along the spines. She stopped at a low shelf where the books had pictures on their covers, easier ones, she could tell. She pulled one out. It was about frogs. She looked at the first page. The frog sat on a lily pad and looked at the moon. She read it 3 times. Then she looked up and found Zara watching her with kind eyes, no judgment, just patience. "One sentence at a time," Zara said softly. "That's what my mom always says, 1 sentence at a time." Chapter 2. The book that should not have been there. 3 weeks passed. Maya went to school. She sat in class. She listened hard. She wrote in her notebook. English words on one side, Indonesian translations on the other, until the pages were dense with her careful, looping handwriting. At home, she watched Australian television programs with the subtitles on, mouthing the words along with the characters. She read her library frog book 17 times until she knew it by heart. She borrowed a new one about dolphins, then one about volcanoes, then one, rather unexpectedly, about the history of cheese. She started to feel the language changing inside her mouth, becoming less like stones and more like water. Not comfortable yet, not natural, but possible. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. It was a Thursday, gray and drizzling. Zara had a dentist appointment and couldn't walk home with Maya, so Maya went to the library to wait for her mother, who was picking her up at 3:30. She found her usual seat, a beanbag in the corner, half hidden by a shelf labeled Nature and Science, and opened her dolphin book. She had read only 2 pages when she heard it. A sound, very faint, like the ticking of a clock, but musical, tick-tick chime, coming from the direction of the tall alcove at the back of the room. Maya looked up. Mrs. Baxter wasn't at her desk. The library was empty. Tick-tick chime. Maya set down her dolphin book and stood up. She walked towards the alcove. The beam of late afternoon light was gone. The clouds had swallowed it, but the books on that tall shelf still seemed to glow faintly like embers. She stopped in front of the shelf and looked up. Most of the books there were unremarkable looking. Old, cloth-bound, the kind of thing that made you sneeze just looking at them. But on the middle shelf, exactly at her eye level, was a book she was certain she had never seen before. It was thin. Its cover was the deep, shifting blue of the ocean at night, and the title was stamped in gold letters that seemed to pulse with a light of their own. Maya reached out and pulled it from the shelf. The moment her fingers touched the cover, the chiming sound grew louder, and a warmth spread through her hands, not unpleasant, like holding a mug of tea. She opened the book. The first page read, "If you are reading this, you have been chosen. Do not be afraid. The language realm needs you. Turn to page 3. Maya turned to page 3. The page was blank except for a single sentence, written in ink that seemed to shift and swirl as she watched. Read these words aloud and mean them. Below the sentence were 3 lines. I am willing to learn. I am willing to listen. I am willing to try. Maya looked around the empty library. She felt a little bit silly, but she also felt, and this was harder to explain, that the book was asking her something real, something that went beyond paper and ink, and she realized, standing there with her fingertips warm and the faint chime still singing in the air, that the answer was yes, yes to all 3. She took a breath. I am willing to learn, she read. Her voice was small but steady. I am willing to listen. She paused. I am willing to try. The book flew open to its center pages. The floor disappeared, and Maya fell. Chapter 3. Where Words Are Alive. She landed, not hard, but softly, like falling into a pile of cushions on a carpet of bright green grass. She sat up, blinked, and looked around. She was in a valley. It was the strangest valley she had ever seen because it was full of words. Not written words, living ones. Letters drifted through the air like butterflies, golden and silver, forming words and then dissolving and reforming into new ones. A cluster of letters near her knee arranged themselves into the word hello, and then swirled apart into welcome, and then into friend. Streams of glowing syllables wound between the hills like rivers. In the distance, what she had first taken for mountains resolved themselves as she squinted into enormous stacks of books, towers and towers of them, impossibly tall, their pages fluttering in a warm breeze. Extraordinary, isn't it? Maya spun around. Standing behind her was the most eccentric-looking man she had ever seen. He was very old, with a face as wrinkled as a crumpled piece of paper and eyes the exact bright blue of the book she had found in the library. He wore a long coat covered entirely in pockets, pockets of every size, from enormous ones at his knees to tiny ones no bigger than a thumbprint scattered across his lapels, and from each pocket peeked the spine or corner of a book. On his head sat a hat shaped like an inkwell. A white feather quill was tucked behind his left ear. "Welcome," he said with a bow so deep his quill nearly touched the grass, "to the language realm. I am Professor Cornelius Quill, Keeper of Words. And you, Maya Chen, are precisely on time." Maya opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "How do you know my name?" "The book told me," said Professor Quill, as if this were perfectly obvious. "It always finds the right person. And you, my dear, are very much the right person." He beamed at her. "Come, we have much to discuss and very little time." He turned and walked briskly along a path that wound between the drifting letters, his coat pockets bouncing. Maya scrambled to her feet and hurried after him. "Wait," she said. What is this place? Is this real?" "As real as any word you've ever read," said Professor Quill without slowing down. "The language realm exists alongside your world. It always has. Every language that has ever been spoken or written has a realm of its own, and they are all connected here at the center." He swept his arm wide. "This is the English realm, one of the oldest, one of the most vast." Maya looked around. She could see now that the valley was even larger than she'd first thought. It stretched in every direction, and in the distance she could make out what looked like villages and bridges and something that might have been a castle. "What do you mean, I'm the right person?" she asked. Professor Quill stopped walking. He turned to face her, and for a moment his bright eyes were very serious. "The language realm is in trouble," he said. "There is a creature, we call it the Unraveler, that feeds on words. It unravels them, pulls them apart, leaves nothing but silence where meaning used to be. It has been growing stronger for many years." He paused. "Everywhere that people stop valuing language, stop reading, stop listening, stop trying, the Unraveler grows. And when it grows too strong, the words in this realm begin to disappear. When words disappear here, they weaken in your world too. Stories become harder to tell. Ideas become harder to share. People become harder to understand." Maya felt cold, despite the warmth of the valley. "Can it be stopped?" "That is why you are here," said Professor Quill. He reached into one of his larger pockets and produced a small compass. But instead of north, south, east, and west, its 4 points read courage, curiosity, kindness, and persistence. He pressed it into Maya's hand. "You must travel through the 4 provinces of the English realm and restore the word stones in each one. The word stones anchor the language here. They are the oldest, most powerful words in existence. The Unraveler has cracked them. Only a language explorer can repair them." "But I'm not," Maya started. "I'm not good enough at English," she wanted to say. "I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes." Professor Quill raised one finger. "A language explorer," he said gently, "is not someone who already knows everything. It is someone who is willing to learn, willing to listen, willing to try." He smiled. "Sound familiar?" Maya looked down at the compass in her hand. The needle was pointing to courage. "There are 2 others," Professor Quill continued. "You will not be alone. They arrived a few minutes ahead of you." He pointed down the path, just around that bend. Maya looked, and then she walked. Chapter 4. 3 Explorers. Around the bend, sitting on a low stone wall and arguing cheerfully, were 2 children. One was Zara, which made Maya's heart leap with something between relief and absolute bewilderment, but a slightly different Zara than the one from school. This Zara wore a satchel covered in badges that each bore a word: brave, bold, brilliant, boundless. Her hair pom-poms were still there, but they glowed faintly gold at the ends. "Maya!" Zara leaped off the wall. Can you believe this? I was at the dentist and then I was here. The dentist chair dissolved into grass. I'm hoping this means I don't have to have my filling. The other child, the one Zara had been arguing with, was a boy of about 11, freckled and red-haired, with green eyes and a serious expression that kept being undermined by the fact that he was clearly trying very hard not to grin. He wore a navy jumper and had a battered paperback book sticking out of his back pocket. Finn O'Sullivan, he said, holding out his hand to Maya. From Cork. Originally. We live in Sydney now. He paused. I've been here about 10 minutes and I've already found 7 vocabulary words I didn't know, which I think is very efficient. He has a notebook, Zara told Maya gravely. He was writing in it while he fell through the sky. I was not falling through the sky. I was falling through a portal, said Finn with great dignity. And yes, I had my notebook. I always have my notebook. Professor Quill appeared beside them, slightly out of breath. Splendid. You've introduced yourselves. Now, no time to waste. He handed each of them a small, leather-bound book with their name stamped on the cover. Your word journals. Write down every word, every discovery, every question. In the language realm, knowledge that is written down becomes power. He looked at each of them in turn. You must reach the province of stories before nightfall. That is where your journey begins. How will we know the way? Finn asked, pulling out his notebook and, true to form, immediately writing something in it. Professor Quill pointed at the compass in Maya's hand. The compass will guide you. And he reached into a coat pocket and produced 3 small silver whistles. If you are ever in true danger, blow these. I will come as quickly as I can. He pressed one into each of their hands. Then he looked at them all very seriously. Remember this. In the language realm, words are your greatest weapon and your greatest protection. A word spoken clearly, kindly, and at the right moment can do things that no sword or shield ever could. Then he turned and walked back along the path, and the drifting letters closed around him like a curtain, and he was gone. There was a silence. Right, said Zara. She hoisted her satchel onto her shoulder. Province of stories. Let's go. They walked together along the path that wound through the valley of drifting letters. As they went, the letters drifted close and arranged themselves into words around them. Sometimes just ordinary words, tree, cloud, grass, wind, but sometimes phrases, as if the realm itself was trying to communicate. You are on the right path and do not be discouraged, and once, memorably, watch out for the puddle, which was very helpful because Finn stepped around a muddy patch he hadn't noticed just in time. Does the realm always do that? Maya asked. Talk in words. Apparently, said Finn, who was already writing this down. It makes sense, I suppose. The realm is words, so it communicates the way words do. He paused to let a particularly lovely string of silver letters drift past. They spelled the adventure begins and then dissolved. My grandmother always says that when you don't know what to say, the right word will come if you wait quietly. I wonder if that's what this is. The realm waiting quietly until the right moment. Zara was quiet for a step or two. Then she said, When I first came to Australia, the hardest thing wasn't the grammar or the vocabulary. It was the speed. People spoke so fast. I felt like I was always arriving at the conversation after it had already left. She glanced at Maya. Does that happen to you too? All the time, said Maya with feeling. By the time I have understood what someone said, thought of what I want to say back, translated it in my head, and found the English words, the conversation has moved on 3 topics. It gets better, said Zara. I promise. One day you realize you've been thinking in English without noticing you were doing it. And then it's like the motorway opens up. Suddenly there's more space and everything moves a bit faster. She paused. My mum says it takes about 3 years before a new language starts to feel like yours. Not borrowed. Actually yours. 3 years, Maya repeated. 3 years, Zara confirmed. But every month in between, it gets a little bit easier. They walked on. The path curved upward through a gentle hill scattered with wild flowers that each bore, in tiny writing on their petals, a different vocabulary word. Maya bent down and read one. Effervescent adjective, vivid, animated, sparkling. She put it in her word journal. Chapter 5. The Province of Stories. The Province of Stories was breathtaking. It looked like a town from a fairy tale. Cobblestone streets, buildings with curved rooftops painted in warm reds and yellows and blues, and windows that glowed with golden light. But instead of shop signs, every building had a quote above its door, painted in curling letters. ITWASTHE Best OF Times, ITWASTHE Worst OF Times. And threading through the streets, between the legs of the three explorers, were the inhabitants of the province. Characters from stories. Maya recognized some of them. She spotted a girl in a red cape who was explaining, rather loudly, that the wolf had been deeply misrepresented, a boy in green clothes climbing a lamppost, and a small, round creature that was either a cat or something that looked very much like a cat until you looked directly at it, at which point it was clearly not. "This is incredible," Finn breathed, writing furiously in his notebook. "These are fictional characters. They're real asterisk here. Everything a writer imagined and put into words is real here," said a voice. They turned. Sitting on the steps of a tall, narrow building was an old woman with silver hair wound up in a complicated bun secured with what appeared to be a pencil. She wore reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and had ink stains on 3 fingers of her right hand. She looked at them with very sharp eyes. "I am the keeper of this province," she said. "My name is Madame Penrose, and you have come at a dark time." She stood, and they saw that she was taller than she looked sitting down. "Come inside. I'll show you the damage." She led them into the building. Inside was a vast hall, stretching far wider than the buildings outside suggested, the way all the best story buildings do, and it was filled with scenes. Each one was contained in a glowing frame, like a living painting. A child reading by candlelight, a grandmother telling a bedtime story, a classroom full of students with their hands in the air, a boy on a rainy afternoon who had opened a book and forgotten to notice the rain. Many of the frames were dark. Their scenes had gone out like candles. "The word stone of this province," said Madame Penrose heavily, "holds the power of story. The power to imagine, to empathize, to understand lives other than your own. When people stop reading stories, when they lose the language to understand them, the stone cracks." She pointed to the far end of the hall. Set into the wall was a stone about the size of a watermelon, carved with flowing letters and beautiful illustrations. It was cracked down the middle, and from the crack seeped a faint gray smoke that made the room feel cold. Maya stepped towards it. She felt the compass in her hand grow warm, needle spinning to curiosity. "How do we fix it?" she asked. Madame Penrose looked at her carefully. "The word stone of stories can only be repaired by someone who understands why stories matter, not just what a story is, but what it does." She folded her hands. "Tell me, why do stories matter?" There was a silence. Finn was writing in his notebook. Zara was chewing her lip, thinking. Maya thought about the frog book she had read 17 times. She thought about how it had made her feel. Not like she was struggling through a foreign language, but like she was inside something, like the language had opened a door and said, "Come in." She thought about how, after she'd read it, she had felt less alone. She thought about the stories her mother told her in Indonesian. The ones about Bawang Merah and Bawang Putih, about the clever mouse deer, about the princess and the golden snail. And she realized that those stories and the English stories on the library shelves were doing the same thing. They were building bridges between people, between feelings, between a girl in Indonesia and a girl in Australia and every lonely, wondering child in between. "Stories matter," Maya said slowly, finding the words carefully. Because they let you live inside someone else's life for a while. They help you understand how other people feel, even people very different from you. And when you understand people, you stop being afraid of them. She paused. Stories are how human beings share their hearts. The crack in the word stone sealed itself with a sound like a lock clicking shut. The gray smoke vanished. The dark frames on the wall lit up one by one, warm and golden. Madame Penrose smiled, a slow, wide smile. "Well said," she said. "Extremely well said." Finn looked up from his notebook. "Did you just fix an ancient magical artifact with a paragraph?" "Apparently," said Zara, looking impressed. "Write down what she said," Madame Penrose told Finn firmly. "Word for word. That kind of understanding is worth keeping." Chapter 6. The Province of Connection. The Province of Connection was noisier. It was a vast marketplace, or something like one, full of people from every corner of the world, all speaking, gesturing, explaining, laughing. The air was thick with the sound of conversation, but threaded through it all, like a single bright wire, was English. Not the only language. Maya caught snatches of what sounded like French, Mandarin, Swahili, Portuguese, and at least two languages she couldn't identify at all, but the one that many of the different groups used to speak to each other. The streets between the stalls were wide and busy. A woman in a beautiful embroidered dress argued cheerfully in English with a man in a business suit who was gesturing at a blueprint. Students from what looked like a dozen different countries sat around a circular fountain, each one taking turns to read from a book held open in the center of the group. An elderly gentleman sat at a small table writing letters, one in what Maya recognized as Japanese and one in English, placing them side by side and comparing them carefully, as if to make sure the meaning was perfectly preserved between the two. "Look at this," said Finn softly, stopping in front of a stall where a woman was selling maps. But they were not ordinary maps. They were maps of conversations. You could trace the route a single idea had taken as it traveled from one language to another, crossing oceans and centuries, changing slightly each time, picking up new colors from each new culture. There was a map showing the word algebra, which had begun in Arabic, algebra, and crossed into Latin and then Spanish and then English, carrying mathematics with it. There was another showing the word pajamas, which had started in Hindi Urdu, pajama, meaning leg garment, and made its way into the English-speaking world through the British Empire. There were maps for chocolate, from Nahuatl, coffee, from Arabic through Ethiopian, robot, from Czech, and dozens more. "English is full of borrowed words," said the map seller, noticing Finn's wide eyes. She was a cheerful woman with silver bangles on both wrists that chimed when she moved. "More than any other language. Over half its vocabulary comes from somewhere else. French, Latin, Greek, German, Hindi, Arabic, Japanese. English is, in a way, the world's greatest borrower." She smiled. "Which means that when you learn English, you are, in a small way, touching all of those other languages too. All of those other histories and stories and people." Maya thought about that. She had assumed, without really thinking about it, that English was a foreign thing, separate from her own language, her own culture, standing apart from her like a wall she had to climb. But perhaps it was more like a river that had gathered water from many different streams, and her Indonesian, with its own history, its own borrowed words from Sanskrit and Dutch and Arabic, was also a river, and perhaps, she thought, two rivers can flow together without either of them disappearing. She bought a map. It showed the journey of the word serendipity, coined by the English writer Horace Walpole, who had taken it from a Persian fairy tale called The Three Princes of Serendip, an old name for the island of Sri Lanka. She tucked it carefully into her word journal. "It's a meeting place," Zara said, eyes wide. "Look, that woman is from Japan and that man is from Brazil, and they're both speaking English because it's the language they share. English is used by over 1 billion people around the world," Finn said, reading from a small sign near the province gate. More people speak English as a second language than as a first. It is the most widely used language in international science, business, medicine, and diplomacy. He looked up. I did not know that. I did, said Zara. My mum works in international trade. She says English is the reason she can do her job. She works with people from 12 different countries, and they all communicate in English even though it's nobody's first language. The compass needle swung to curiosity. Maya held it up, and it pulled her gently to the left, through the marketplace, past a stall selling what appeared to be bottled conversations, past a group of children playing a complicated game with vocabulary cards, to a quieter corner of the province where a fountain stood in the center of a small square. The fountain was extraordinary. It was shaped like a globe, and water poured over it in streams that traced the routes of ships and aeroplanes. But the water was not flowing. It had frozen mid-pour, and the globe at the center was dull and dark, and the word stone set into its base was cracked and dim. Beside the fountain stood a boy, about their age, dark-haired, with a worried expression, staring at the frozen water and wringing his hands. "Hello," said Maya. The boy startled. He looked at them with an expression of desperate hope. "Oh, are you the language explorers?" Professor Quill said someone would come. "That's us," said Zara. "What's happened?" The boy's name, it turned out, was Raphael, and he was one of the province's inhabitants, a word creature. Professor Quill would have called him, though he looked entirely like an ordinary boy. He had been born from the concept of asterisk communication asterisk, and his purpose was to help the province run smoothly. There was an argument, he said miserably, leading them around the frozen fountain. A great argument. 3 large groups of people, all trying to explain something very important to each other, a discovery, a solution to a problem. But they couldn't find the words. They didn't have the vocabulary. And the unraveler saw the gap between them and slipped inside. He pointed to the cracks in the word stone. When people cannot communicate, when they don't have a shared language, misunderstandings grow. The unraveler feeds on misunderstandings. "So," said Finn carefully, "the word stone of connection represents the ability to communicate, to share ideas across differences." "Yes," said Raphael, "and it can only be restored by a demonstration of that ability. You must solve the puzzle of the 3 groups." He pointed to 3 archways on one side of the square, each leading to a different chamber. Each group has half a message. None of them can read the other's half because it's written in a language they don't understand. Your task is to be the bridge. They split up. Finn to the first chamber, Zara to the second, Maya to the third. Maya's chamber held a group of scientists. They looked like scientists, at any rate, with white coats and clipboards, who spoke to her rapidly in a mixture of English and what sounded like Italian. She listened hard. She caught words: water, formula, temperature, solution. They showed her a diagram, and she studied it carefully, matching the symbols to the words she knew. Then they met back in the square and compared notes. Finn had spoken to a group of farmers. Zara had spoken to a group of builders. The farmers are trying to explain that their crops are failing because of a water problem, Finn said. They know what the problem is, but not how to fix it. The builders know how to build a new irrigation system, Zara said, but they don't know where the problem is. And the scientists, Maya said, looking down at the notes she had made carefully in her word journal, have a formula that treats the water and makes it safe. But they couldn't explain it clearly enough for the others to understand. She paused. All 3 groups have part of the solution. They just need someone to put it all together in language they can all understand. So that's us, said Zara. We're the translators. They went back to each group in turn, they explained. They pointed at diagrams and wrote words down. They used simple, clear English, not complicated, not showing off, just clear. And the 3 groups slowly began to understand each other. You could see it happen. The confusion in their faces replaced by recognition, then by relief, then by the beginning of a plan. The fountain thawed. The water began to flow. The word stone lit up from within, warm amber like a sunset. That, said Finn, writing fast in his notebook, is why English matters. Not because it's better than any other language, but because it's a bridge. He underlined the word bridge twice. When enough people share one language, imperfectly, approximately, but asterisk enough asterisk, they can solve problems together that they could never solve alone. My mum would like that sentence, said Zara. I'm going to remember it. Hashtag chapter 7. The Night Crossing. Between the province of connection and the province of knowledge lay a dark wood called the Thicket of Unspoken Things. Professor Quill had warned them about this. He'd appeared briefly beside the fountain after it was restored, his coat pockets even more crammed with books than before, and pressed 3 small lanterns into their hands. These are word lanterns, he said. They burn brighter the more clearly you speak and think. In the thicket of unspoken things, the darkness is made of confusion, of words that were never said, ideas that were never expressed, questions that were never asked. The unraveler loves it there. He looked at each of them. Stay together. Keep speaking. Don't let the silence win. The thicket was cold and gray, with trees whose branches were twisted into shapes that looked, if you let your imagination run away, which Maya was trying not to, like enormous grasping hands. The air was heavy and strange, and with every step Maya felt a little less sure of herself. Doubts crept in, the way they always did in dark places. You don't know enough words. You'll say it wrong. You'll sound foolish. She stopped walking. Maya. Sarah was beside her immediately. What's wrong? Maya felt her throat tighten. I keep thinking I'm not good enough for this. My English isn't good enough. What if I can't say the right things? What if I get the words wrong and I fail and... Stop, said Finn, not unkindly. He turned around and looked at her very directly. Can I tell you something? Maya nodded. When I was 7, Finn said, my family moved from Cork to Sydney, and I had an Irish accent, which apparently sounds very different from an Australian one, and for the first 6 months nobody understood half of what I said. Even though we were all speaking English, he adjusted his glasses. I spent a year being afraid to speak in case I said things wrong, and that year was the loneliest year of my life. Not because I didn't have words, because I was afraid to use them. He paused. His lantern flickered. Your English is better than you think it is, he said. You explained why stories matter and literally healed a magical artifact. You translated for 3 different groups in 4 minutes. He stopped. Thought. You have 2 languages, Maya. That means you have 2 ways of understanding the world. That's not a weakness. That's extraordinary. Maya's lantern flared up, suddenly bright. He's right, said Zara. Her own lantern was burning steady and warm. I've got 3 languages. English, Yoruba, and a bit of French from my grandmother. And I found that having more than one language is like having more than one key on your keyring. Different doors open with different keys. She squeezed Maya's hand. English is just one more key. And you're getting better at it every day. The darkness in the thicket seemed to thin slightly. Maya straightened up. Okay, she said. Let's keep going. They walked on, talking. About everything. About their families, their favorite foods, their fears, their favorite words. Finn's was serendipity. Zara's was Ubuntu, a Yoruba concept meaning I am because we are. Maya's, after some thought, was Pelangi, rainbow in Indonesian, but she was collecting English ones and had recently become very fond of luminous. The thicket grew brighter as they talked, and narrower, and then they were through it, stepping out into a vast, sun-bright plain, and the province of knowledge lay ahead of them, a shining city of glass and stone, its tallest building a tower of windows that stretched so high its top was lost in clouds. Chapter 8. The Province of Knowledge. The Province of Knowledge was the most orderly place Maya had ever seen. and she had grown up with a mother who alphabetized the spice rack. Every building was labeled precisely. Every path was swept clean and signposted. Citizens moved briskly, carrying stacks of papers or conducting intense conversations while walking very fast. The entire province hummed with a low, contented busyness that reminded Maya of a library. Not just any library, but the special kind where everyone is very busy with something fascinating. The keeper of this province was a woman named Dr. Meridian. She was about 40, with close-cropped gray hair and round spectacles, and she wore a white lab coat over a smart blue dress. She met them at the province gate and shook each of their hands briskly. "Explorers, good, you're needed." She was already walking. They hurried to keep up. The province of knowledge holds the power of understanding, the ability to learn, to think critically, to access and process information. The word stone here has been cracking for some time. She didn't look back, but her voice was tight with worry. The Unraveler has been working on it since people began to think that knowing things was not important, that looking things up was easier than understanding them. That surface is the same as depth. She stopped abruptly in front of a tall glass building and turned to face them. "Do you understand the difference between knowing a fact and understanding an idea?" Finn opened his mouth immediately, because Finn always opened his mouth immediately when educational questions were asked. "A fact," he said, "is a piece of information. An idea is what you do with it." Dr. Meridian looked at him with cool appraisal. "Adequate. Better." She looked at the others. "Knowing a fact," said Zara slowly, "is like having a piece of a puzzle. Understanding an idea is like seeing the whole picture the puzzle makes." "Better," said Dr. Meridian. Maya thought about it. She thought about all the English words she had been collecting, all the vocabulary written in her notebook, English on one side, Indonesian on the other. She had the facts, the definitions, the spellings, the pronunciations. But understanding, really using the words, knowing which one to pick in which moment, feeling the difference between sad and melancholy and bereft, that was something different. That took time and reading and listening and trying. Understanding, Maya said, is what you build with facts over time. It's when knowledge stops being something you look at and starts being something you use. She paused. Like how I know the word luminous means full of light, but I understand it when I see sunlight on the water and think that's luminous, and the word fits exactly. Dr. Meridian was quiet for a moment. "Come inside," she said. The inside of the building was a vast laboratory, not for science exactly, but for ideas. The walls were covered in equations and diagrams and maps and pieces of writing. At the center of the room, on a plinth of white stone, sat the word Stone of Knowledge. It was deeply cracked, more so than the others had been. The crack was not just down the middle, but spreading outward in a web, like ice about to shatter. And around it, in a circle, sat dozens of children who stared blankly ahead, their eyes dull and unfocused. "What's wrong with them?" Maya asked, alarmed. "They are children who were told that learning didn't matter," Dr. Meridian said quietly. "That they didn't need to read widely or think carefully or understand things deeply." The Unraveler got to them, not directly, but through the slow accumulation of not caring. She looked at them, and for the first time her brisk manner softened into something sadder. Language is the tool of thought. When people stop building their language, stop learning new words, stop reading, stop trying to express complex ideas, their thinking shrinks. The world becomes smaller. It becomes harder to understand anything that is unfamiliar. Finn sat down beside one of the blank-eyed children. He picked up a book that was lying on the floor beside the child, a picture book, simple, bright, and opened it. He started reading aloud, his Irish accent warm and rhythmic. "I used to hate reading," he said between sentences to no one in particular. "When I was 6. I couldn't do it properly and I thought I was stupid." He kept reading. "Then my dad read me the BFG. Every night, one chapter, doing all the voices. and I realized that the story was worth the struggle of getting there. He turned a page. So I struggled. I practiced every day. And then one day I could read faster than my dad could speak. And he said, "Finn, you've overtaken me." And it was the best feeling in the world. The child beside him blinked, then looked at the book, then slowly reached out and touched the page. Zara dropped to her knees beside another child and started talking, asking questions, pointing at things, saying, "What do you call this? What does this make you think of?" And the child began slowly to wake up, to respond, to lean forward with something that was almost interest. Maya moved to the word stone. She looked at it for a long time. Then she opened her word journal and began to read aloud from it. All the words she had collected, English and Indonesian side by side, with her small notes about how to use them, what they felt like, where she had first heard them. She read the whole thing, beginning to end, her voice growing stronger as she went. The cracks in the word stone began to close. Knowledge isn't information, she thought as she read. Knowledge is what happens when you care enough to learn. The last crack sealed with a sound like a pen scratching across paper. The blank-eyed children blinked and stirred. Dr. Meridian put her hands over her eyes, and Maya thought, just for a moment, that the scientist might be crying. Chapter 9. The Province of Expression. The fourth province was the smallest and the wildest. It had no neat streets, no clean paths. It was a sprawling landscape of color and sound, paintings that moved on every surface, sculptures that rearranged themselves while you watched, music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. A man danced in the middle of the road. Two women argued passionately about a poem. A group of children built an enormous sandcastle that kept changing shape. "This is the province of expression," said a voice above them. Floating. Actually floating cross-legged in midair, about 2 meters off the ground, was a young woman with long braided hair, paint on her hands and bare feet. She grinned down at them. "I'm Celestine," she said. "I keep this province. When the others told me explorers were coming, I was so excited I forgot to stop floating." She dropped lightly to the ground. "Come on, I'll show you what's going wrong." The word stone of expression was in the wildest, most colorful part of the province, a garden full of flowers that were made of musical notes, their petals unfolding and refolding as the wind changed. The stone itself sat at the garden's heart, and it was, unlike the others, not simply cracked. It was shattered into 5 large pieces, scattered across the garden floor. "Oh," said Finn. "The unraveler hit this one hardest," Celestine said. Her voice was carefully light, but her eyes were sad. Expression is the most personal of the 4 powers. It's the ability to say what is inside you, to find the words for your feelings, your ideas, your creativity. When people feel they don't have the language to express themselves, they go silent. And silence is what the unraveler likes most of all. She looked at each of them. "To restore this stone, you each need to put 1 piece back. But each piece can only be restored by an act of expression. You have to create something." She gestured at the garden. "Use any of this. The paint, the music, the words. Make something true." It was the hardest task yet. Finn paced for a while, notebook clutched to his chest. Then he sat down, opened it, and began to write. He wrote quickly and without crossing anything out. A poem Maya could see from where she stood, though she couldn't read it from that distance. When he was finished, he read it aloud. A poem about moving from Cork to Sydney, about leaving your words behind in one place and having to build new ones somewhere else, about how a dictionary is like a suitcase you can fill with the things that matter. It was funny in some places and etchingly honest in others, and when he finished reading, one of the 5 stone pieces rose from the ground and clicked into place. Zara told a story. She told it standing up, without notes, the way her grandmother had taught her, with her whole body, her hands moving and her voice rising and falling. It was a story from Nigerian tradition, the story of the sky god, who gave language to humans so they would never be alone. And she told it first in Yoruba and then again in English. And the English version was different, not a translation, but a asterisk transformation asterisk. The same story wearing new clothes, and somehow both versions were the truth. Two pieces clicked into place. Then it was Maya's turn. She stood in the garden for a long time. The flowers made soft music around her. She thought about the school library and the frog book and the compass pointing to courage. She thought about her mother's sunflowers. She thought about Professor Quill saying a language explorer is someone who is willing to learn. She opened her word journal. She began to write. She wrote about what it felt like to lose a language, not literally, but in practice, to arrive somewhere and feel all your words shrink away, to feel the gap between what you knew and what you could say yawning wide and cold. She wrote about the hollow feeling in her chest at school. She wrote about the frog book. She wrote about the moment. 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning when Mr. Aldridge asked a question and her hand went up and she answered correctly, clearly, in full English sentences, and felt the hollow place fill up a little. She wrote about learning a new language, not as losing your old one, but as gaining a new set of eyes, as adding colors to a palette, as building a longer bridge. She wrote in English. Every sentence, every word, every punctuation mark placed as carefully as a sunflower stitch. When she put the pen down, all 5 pieces of the word stone rose and assembled themselves with a sound like bells, and the province of expression burst into color so bright Maya had to cover her eyes. When she opened them, Celestine was floating again, arms spread wide, laughing. Chapter 10. The Unraveler. It came when they were walking back to the province of stories, where Professor Quill had arranged to meet them. The sky above the language realm had been steadily brightening as they repaired each word stone, as if the realm itself was breathing easier. But now, without warning, the sky cracked, not like glass, like a page being torn. And through the crack, the Unraveler came. It was hard to look at directly. It was not quite a creature and not quite a force. It was something in between, large and shapeless, made of what Maya could only describe as anti-language. The absence of words, compressed into something heavy and cold. Where it moved, the beautiful drifting letters of the language realm fell dark. Words written on signs and buildings faded. The music of the province of expression stopped. It turned its attention, if it had attention, on the 3 children. "Run?" Zara said. "I think so," said Finn. They ran. The Unraveler followed, slow but inexorable, and wherever it passed, the realm went gray and silent. Maya looked back and saw the marketplace of connection fading, the laughter silenced, the shared conversations dissolving. She ran faster. They burst through the gate of the province of stories and found Professor Quill already there, his coat pockets spilling books onto the cobblestones, his face drawn with something between worry and fierce concentration. "You repaired all 4 stones," he said when he saw them. Not a question. "Yes," Maya gasped. "But the Unraveler, I know." He looked behind them. The crack in the sky had widened. The Unraveler was coming. "I had hoped the stones would be enough, and they will be, but not alone." He turned to Maya. Something in his expression had changed. "You know what you must do." "I don't," she said. "I don't know." "Yes, you do," said Finn quietly beside her. He was looking at the compass in her hand. Its needle was pointing. as it had at the very beginning, to courage. Professor Quill knelt in front of Maya. The Unraveler feeds on the belief that words are not enough, that language doesn't matter, that the effort of learning is not worth making. He held her gaze. It can only be defeated by the opposite, by someone who truly believes, knows deep down from their own experience, that language is worth fighting for. He paused. Not someone who has always found it easy, someone who has found it hard and kept going anyway. Someone who knows the value of a word because they have worked to own it. Maya looked at the Unraveler. It was at the province gate. The letters on the buildings around her were fading. She thought about every English word she had ever learned, every sentence she had built carefully, the way you stack stones to make a wall, placing each one with attention and care. She thought about the frog book. She thought about her conversation with Zara on the very first day, one sentence at a time. She thought about her word journal, pages and pages of it, and the words in it felt less like ink on paper and more like asterisk, wait asterisk, like something solid and real she could hold on to. She stepped forward. She opened her mouth. Words matter, she said. Her voice was small against the immensity of the Unraveler, but it was steady. Words matter because they are how we think. They are the shapes we put our ideas into, so we can look at them and understand them. Without words, our thoughts are just feelings, powerful but formless, like water without a cup. She took another step. When I came to Australia, I felt like I had lost myself, because I had lost my language. And that was true. I had lost a language, my voice in that language, my cleverness in that language, my funniness and my confidence in myself. She stopped walking. The Unraveler was directly in front of her now, and the cold of it was like standing in front of an open freezer, and the gray was at the edges of everything. But I didn't give up. I kept going. And every word I learned was not just a word. It was a piece of myself, put back together in a new language. A new version of me, made of new words. And that version is real. That version is mine. The Unraveler shuddered. Language is worth fighting for, she said louder now. English is worth learning. Not because it is better, not because it is the only one, but because it opens doors. Because it is how I can talk to Zara and Finn and people I haven't met yet. Because it is how I can read stories from every corner of the world. Because it is how I can share my ideas and have them understood. Because it is how I can be known. Her voice was very clear now, and the letters of the language realm were beginning to re-emerge on the buildings around her, glowing brighter as she spoke. And you are made of everything that denies that. Everything that says it's too hard. Everything that says it doesn't matter, but it does matter. Every word matters. Every attempt matters. Every brave, imperfect, trying sentence matters. She raised the compass. Its 4 points blazed. Courage, curiosity, kindness, persistence. All 4 of them at once. The light from the compass hit the Unraveler and it shrank. Not dramatically, not with a bang, but steadily, the way darkness shrinks when you turn on a light. The gray pulled back. The cold retreated. The letters on the buildings blazed back to life, and the Unraveler became smaller and smaller, until it was no bigger than a shadow, and then smaller still, until it was just a small, dark thing curled at Maya's feet, harmless and shrinking. And then it was gone. The language realm erupted in light. Chapter 11. After the storm, Professor Quill declared it a day of celebration. The three provinces combined their populations for the first time in anyone's memory, and the celebration was extraordinary. The characters from the province of stories told their tales in the marketplace of connection, and the scientists of knowledge danced with the painters of expression, and Celestine floated above it all, scattering paint drops of color that landed and bloomed into flowers. Professor Quill found the three explorers sitting together on the steps of the province of stories' tallest building, sharing a bag of something that tasted like warm words, sweet and slightly fizzy and somehow nourishing. "You should be very proud," he said, settling beside them with a crake of aged knees. "What you did today, what Maya did, cannot be undone easily. The Unraveler will be back someday, but it will be smaller and weaker, and the word stones will hold for a long time." "How do we keep it small?" Finn asked. "Back in our world, I mean. What do we do?"